Welcome to Baseball Biz. I'm Mark Corbett, your host, and once again with me is none other than Mr. Brandon No Way. How you doing today, Brandon?
I'm doing really good, Mark. It's Super Bowl week. How are you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. What's Super Bowl got to do with baseball, man?
Well, nothing really, but it's always a great time of year.
Oh, it is. It really is. I know. I'm giving you a little grief, but for folks who don't know, we both live in Tampa, so Super Bowl this week means a lot for us Tampanians. It's going to be a fun time, and we're going to talk about the excitement that's going on in baseball overall, and maybe even find a way to link up the Super Bowl with what we're talking about. So, Brandon, you can always find at sportsblitz.pod. No. It's sportsblitzpod on Twitter. And you can find me, at the Baseball Biz on Twitter. So we look forward to that. And, of course, you can find this at several different podcast directories like Apple, iTunes, Stitcher, and several other ones I'm not thinking of at the moment. But we'll add some of those in there maybe. Anyway, the thing of it is an exciting week. It's just a few mere weeks before the season begins. And Brandon, what's cooking on the hot stove?
Well, it's still cooking pretty good. We've had pretty much big signings every day. We'll start up in Minnesota, where Nelson Cruz, he signed a one-year, $13 million deal with the Twins. Last year, he was sixth in MVP voting, hit .303 with 16 homers. The Blue Jays, they reached a minor league deal with pitcher Francisco Liriano. He was with Toronto in 2016 and half of 2017, but he did not pitch for them, or he did not pitch at all in 2020. Then somebody who had a big day other than Punxsutawney Phil yesterday was Chris Archer, who, despite battling injury and pretty much struggling the past 2.5 years, roughly, signed a one-year, $6.5 million deal with the Rays, where he spent 7.5 years, was a two-time All-Star, and he was traded in 2018 to Pittsburgh for Tyler Glasnow, Austin Meadows, and Shane Baz.
Wow. I remember as a Rays fan, a lot of people loved Chris Archer. They loved Evan Longoria. And some of these people, you say, okay, they're a legacy player, and I want to see them stick around. Unfortunately, Chris at that point was kind of waning. It wasn't the best of his career. You wondered if he had peaked at that point. And that trade was just crazy stupid. I mean, the guys that we got for it, I'm saying, well, who the hell is Tyler Glasnow? Who's this Austin Meadows guys? Because they weren't necessarily performing at their level that you would think. But, man, they were a heck of a good payoff in a long term, or actually in the next couple of years for the Rays. So, Chris, we hated to see him go. And now we got him back. We got a legacy player.
Yeah, he was a guy who he had, 2 really good years here. And then he kind of tapered off the last couple years. And even though his record doesn't show that he was really good, he was really good because that was a time where the Rays they were not very good. They were not up to what they were today. Then he got traded. He struggled really much the whole time in Pittsburgh, and he didn't pitch at all last year because he had surgery to relieve thoracic outlet syndrome. And you don't know what that is. It's basically a blood clot in your shoulder. And it comes a lot in athletes where they're raising their arms above their shoulders a lot. So pitchers get it a lot. And hockey players get it a lot too when they do slap shots because they have to raise their arms up so high. And Tampa Bay fans know plenty of that because Steven Stamkos of the Lightning, he had to get surgery late in the year for having a blood clot. And he missed pretty much the whole playoffs and only played the last game of the year where they were eliminated. So we have plenty of experience with our athletes having thoracic outlet syndrome.
Well, and I was reading I know, and it's good to see, people like Stamkos, et cetera, come back from this. It's heartening. It may be Chris will come back as well. I was reading some reports where he's been doing some pitch with some folks down here in Florida, and people felt like he was doing pretty good with it. So I'm glad to hear that, and maybe we have something good coming here. But what was it? I was looking at 2021. They had the option, the Pirates, for a contract extension with him. They were looking at, I think, about $11 million. So, wow, that's a significant difference for Chris going from that to a $6.5 million deal. But I'm as much as I have some uneasiness about this, I think that when he comes back, maybe with that surgery and maybe with the Rays pitching coach, Kyle Snyder, they can make a real difference for him. Plus, the other thing, maybe it's you're saying with Chris in the past, maybe he didn't have the hitters that we hope that we have this year with the Rays.
Yeah, we've said it many times, maybe he was a guy that he kind of wore out his welcome, it felt like, near the end. And, of course, he was a younger guy then. Maybe it's because he's older. He's gone through some rougher times. He's probably matured a bit more. So, and hopefully with the more talent around him in the organization, he can be a really key guy going forward because we don't really have a whole lot of starting pitchers, so we can use all the help we can get.
No doubt, no doubt. So, best wishes to Chris and the Rays for this. And there's a lot more cooking too, isn't there, Brandon? What else you got?
The Mets, they made another trade as they traded minor league infielder Federico Polanco to the Marlins for starting pitcher Jordan Yamamoto, who has struggled a bit with the Marlins, but the Mets see him as a depth piece going forward with their rotation. Sean Doolittle, he agrees to a deal with the Reds, and he's 34, and he pitched only 7 2/3 innings last year, and he has a career 3.07 ERA. Another former Ray is on the move as Baltimore traded Alex Cobb to the Angels for second baseman Jahmai Jones, who was the 7th-ranked prospect in the Angels system, and Baltimore will also pay half of Cobb's $15 million salary this year.
Wow.
The Phillies and Didi Gregorius, they agreed to a 2-year, $28 million deal. Yes, indeedy. Another former Ray is back with the team as Steven Souza Jr. signed a minor league deal with the Astros. He had 30 homers with the Rays in 2017, but he battled injuries in 18 and 19 and appeared in only 11 games last year with the Cubs. Then the big news of the past week, Nolan Arenado, one of the best players in baseball, was traded to the Cardinals, with Colorado paying $50 million of the $199 million that he is owed. And according to SI.com, Colorado won't receive any of their top prospects from St. Louis, including the number 1 prospect, which is third baseman Nolan Gorman, and 2020 first-round pick Jordan Walker. Instead, they acquired lefty Austin Gumber, who has a 1.86 ERA and 4 starts in 2020, and he is the only one that they received with major league experience. They also received prospects infielder Eliharis Montero, he was the number 7 prospect in the Cardinals organization before breaking his hand, which set him back last year. Infielder Mateo Gil, right-handed pitcher Tony Losi, and righty Jake Summers.
There's a lot of activity there, eh?
Yeah, and it's amazing. They wanted to get more, quantity over quality from everything I've seen, the people that ranked it, and it's kind of crazy how the Orioles got a better return for Alex Cobb, who is a pretty good pitcher that we've seen with the Rays, and he wasn't that great with the Orioles. Of course, we didn't get to see him as much than the Rockies did from Nolan Arenado, who is arguably a top 5 player in all of baseball.
Wow.
Going back to the stove, Eddie Rosario signs a 1-year deal with the Indians. He had 32 homers and 109 RBIs in 2019 with the Twins, and he was placed on outright waivers and went unclaimed this offseason. And the Cubs and Jock Peterson agreed to a 1-year, $7 million deal. And last year he hit 190, 7 home runs, and 121 at-bats in 2020. But in 2019 he hit a career-high 36 homers. And he is expected to play every day, and is best known for saying after striking out, he yelled, I'm paraphrasing, "Effing gosh dog it, bleh."
Gosh.
Aaron Loop, a former Ray, he signed with the Mets, and last year he had a 2.52 ERA in 25 innings. Masahiro Tanaka is returning to Japan with the Tohoku Rakuten Golden Eagles of the Nippon Professional Baseball League. Zack Scott is named the acting general manager of the Mets.
If you don't mind, let me stop there for a second on Tanaka. I mean, that's a guy personally, he's gotten a little older in the game. He's been kind of a legend to some degree with the Yankees. But, I didn't like him because I was going to see him hit my guy Joey Wendell last year, which it's like, here he is pitching for the Yankees. And while he's going back to an old home team, I guess, in Japan, there was a lot of rumblings out there, too, I saw, Brandon, about that he was kind of waiting for something to come back from the Yankees and maybe a couple other teams. I don't think that's going to happen now. But the story where at first I was hearing, he's looking forward to going back to Japan, et cetera. While I think that's valid, it sounded like if somebody put a little bit more money on the table, he certainly would have considered staying here.
Yeah, he's a guy where, I don't think he's, a top of the line ace, one of the best pitchers in baseball. I think he's, a guy who can be a number one pitcher, definitely a really, really good number two pitcher who, honestly, I would love to have on my team because from what we've seen him in his 7 years he played here, he never really went through a time where he struggled, where people were just like mashing his pitches.
Right.
He started off really hot, but then he kind of cooled down. But he was always consistent. Like he never hurt the team, it felt like.
Well, that means a lot. And I too, I saw him as still seeing value for a lot of teams. I mean, there's a lot of teams that could have taken him on, and maybe I don't know what money he was asking, but I hate to see him go. I wish him well back in Japan, and going back to his old home team there with the Golden Eagles. But that's the way it goes sometimes. See you later, Tanaka.
All right, staying in New York, Zack Scott, he was named the acting GM of the Mets. He has not been given the official title. He's still considered interim, but if all goes well, he could be considered the favorite to be permanent GM either later this season or in the calendar year. Off the field, more big news as Fernando Tatis Jr. was named the cover athlete of MLB 21 The Show. And at 22, he is the youngest to ever be on the cover, and it features him doing a bat flip on it. So that definitely something worth getting if you love video games, which The Show I think is a great video game to play. I haven't played it in many years. And lastly, Dustin Pedroia announces his retirement after 14 years in baseball.
Great achievement and great player, and thank you for all you've done with the game.
I'd say, yeah, Pedroia, even though he was with the Red Sox, he was always one of my favorite infielders to watch. And, even though the ending of his career wasn't the greatest, of course, with his injuries, I believe he said he couldn't run with the injuries he has now, so he had to hang him up. But I think definitely one day he'll be in Cooperstown.
Yeah, I think we'd all like to see that. So that's a good point. And coming back to Tatis for a moment, a young guy with the Padres, I mean, he's exciting. And so I'm not completely surprised to see him on the cover of the MLB 21, The Show. But I saw that yesterday he got another honor, if you want to call it that. And he's going to be card number 1 in the Topps latest series for your baseball cards out there. I mean, but taking a look back there again, as you were saying, with Zack Scott becoming the acting GM of the Mets, that's not surprising because they had to. And players, much like, office personnel, office management, much like players, there are deadlines. And I don't know that these are written down in stone, but basically, you're not supposed to be out there copying office person from another team during this point of the year because it would just be bedlam. Can you imagine if halfway through the season or just before opening day, you're getting another general manager? And the only reason the Mets had to do this was because Mr. Porter was Mr. Porter and did bad things and had to be removed.
And it's not like they're getting somebody who is just like a numbers cruncher. From everything I've seen, he was really key in all their decisions that they've made so far this offseason. And of course, being with the Red Sox, he does have championship experience, and he's good with both analytics and has a background in scouting. So it's not like they're getting somebody who is just being thrown out there. They don't really know what they're doing. This is a guy who, maybe one day would be a GM, but he just got it a little bit quicker because of circumstances.
Yeah, and we'll give a little bit more look at him just a little further in the show here, but Yeah, he's making a difference. He's got a history. I, like you, believe that he may very well be the permanent GM probably before the end of the season. Oh, my gosh. Mets. This has been an exciting offseason to watch what's going on there. And, everything from change in ownership to who's being brought in, the money being spent. A lot of this started with the change in ownership. Kind of talking about the front office, it was the Wilpon that owned the Mets. There's some decisions that were made early on before Steve Cohen, the new owner, came on that really had a negative impact. And I'm looking here at an article from Joe Nacera and see from Bloomberg. He says Fred Wilpon was duped by Bernie Madoff, lost millions of dollars afterward, and piled up debt. His reward, $2.45 billion. That's what I guess he got for the Mets. And if we're looking at this, seeing time and time again, this poor soul had invested with Mr. Madoff, the criminal. It's a revelation Madoff had been running a decades-long fraud, was a disaster for Wilpon. $500 million, I guess, he had given to him was gone. There's a lot of lawsuits that went on. He goes on to say, that there was money that was taken. To stay afloat, the Mets took an emergency $25 million loan from Major League Baseball under the Wilpons. And the following year, the team borrowed $40 million from the Bank of America. It's Wilpon had sold some of his stock. Anyway, time after time after time, this poor son of a gun made some bad decisions. So a lot of debt piled up. So it wasn't surprising that somebody like Steve Cohen, who was a long-time Mets fan, not just an investor, came in and picked this team up.
Yeah, I remember earlier, just a couple of months ago, we were practically, as I would say, drinking Cohen's bathwater. We were really big fans of the move and everything he was bringing to the Mets. And I don't know whose stock has been through who's gone through crazier roller coasters the past month, either the Mets or the GameStop. I don't know, but the Mets always seem to, their fans are saying on Twitter, Mets gonna Met. I mean, it looks like everything's turning around, and then, coming back with hedge funds, they're losing monies, and now you have all these disgusting things going on with their GM, and it's been a heck of a roller coaster for Mets fans.
Yeah, and Steve Cohen, I'm not trying to throw any blame at that man because he's a businessman who makes the decisions, and far be it for me to even begin to fathom what he has to do. But I was looking to something from Market Watch. Evidently, he had some difficulties earlier on in his career. He had some staff, some employees who were working in marketing funds, and they were found guilty of insider trading. Cohen says here he wasn't found guilty and all that, but unfortunately his company was basically saying, sorry, you can't do any trading for a couple of years. So he came back, and he was doing real well. And, but what happened is one of the affiliations or another fund he'd been working with was the Melvin Capital. And Brandon, those are the guys that have been tied up in all this GameStop thing. They were looking for help. So he gave them some help and had given them $750 million. So once Steve Cohen did that, he put a big target on his back, unfortunately. I should say somebody put a big target on his back. Twitter and people who were going to go crazy were nuts. One of those was the station SNY-TV. Now, if you didn't know, SNY-TV is basically like the Mets TV channel. Well, you think, they'd be friendly with Cohen. But by the way, they're still owned by Wilpon, the former Mets owner. And I'm not saying that impacted anything, okay? I feel that they probably felt like they could say whatever the heck they wanted to do. And in Twitter, SNY posted, so he lost a bunch of money in a classic. This is the SNY quote. So he lost a bunch of money in a classic short squeeze. That's a stock market thing. You wouldn't understand, so we all started harassing him on Twitter, and then we started harassing his family online too, and he had to delete his Twitter. 1, that is reprehensible behavior. 2, it sounds like they're enjoying it and just making fun of the whole damn thing. Pardon me. And that just sticks in my craw. Whatever you may think of Steve Cohen and his business practices, to be attacking him and his family on Twitter with something like this, to me is completely reprehensible. Through all this nastiness, Cohen doesn't want to have to deal with this crap anymore. So he winds up putting a statement out there. Let's see, I'll read some of it here. I really enjoyed the back and forth with Mets fans on Twitter, which was unfortunately overtaken this week by misinformation unrelated to the Mets that led to our family getting personal threats, Cohen said in a statement after deactivating his account Friday night. So I'm going to take a break for now, he says. We have other ways to listen to your suggestions and remain committed to doing that. I love our team, this community, and our fans, who are the best in baseball. Bottom line is that this week's events in no way affect our resources and drive to put a championship team on the field. Well, shortly after that, SNYs, I guess for their behavior, and they decided to post something out there saying, earlier tonight, SNY posted a tweet that made light of the harassment Steve Cohen and his family received this past week. We apologize for the error in judgment. Okay, one, you talk about one of the most limp excuses. I'm editing myself here before I say what else I want to say. Well, one of the most limp excuses to say, one, we apologize for the error in judgment. And then again, prior to that, they're saying, SNY posted a tweet that made light of the harassment Steve Cohen and his family received this past week. Okay, the harassment he and his family received this past week doesn't sound like it was just all their fault for bringing this in. It's one of those half-baked apologies. I'm saddened that it was unfortunate that people abuse their opportunity on social media. Whatever you may think of Stephen Cohen, I think his commitment to the team and any abuse that his family got, was ridiculous because his commitment is there.
Yeah, and you can think whatever you want of Cohen. I don't really follow Wall Street stuff, so I don't know everything about his past. And people can think he's a great guy. People can think he's a horrible guy. But just leave the family out of it, because more often than not, the families have nothing to do with, their businesses. So they shouldn't be brought into it. And the original SNY tweet, honest to God, when I first read it, it sounded like they meant to put it on like a burner account, not their official account. That's honestly what it looked like they were trying to do, but they forgot to switch accounts and they put it on the main one.
Well, let's hear it for social media idiocy. Come on, people, wake up and do it right. There's no need to be attacking people here. And, and even the people that are doing it, I don't want to say don't be so stupid. I just assume they stay stupid and we can see their ignorance out there in full view. But, I don't know, brother. I tend to get a little anxious and upset about all that, but they're going to have to do what they're going to do. And the Mets have been through a few things. I mean, we talked about Porter and we talked about Zack Scott. He's made some fantastic decisions. So Met fans, one, let me say I'm with you, and I'm looking forward to everything that's going on. And Zack Scott, you gave us a little bit of history about him. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the changes, some of the additions he's made to this team?
Yeah, he helped bring in the big trade this offseason that the Mets made was Francisco Lindor and Carlos Carrasco. He played a big part in that. He helps re-sign Noah Syndergaard to a one-year deal. And in January of 21, they made 45 changes.
Good gravy.
I mean, I've never really counted, but I think that's more than some teams make in an entire season. And they did it in a month. And that included arbitration and claiming pitcher Stephen Tarpley, who had been put on waivers by Miami. And in those 45 changes, that included a total of 28 free agents. And as I mentioned earlier, he played a part in the trade for righty Jordan Yamamoto.
And that's going to be interesting to see Yamamoto playing too. But and you look across everybody on there. What do you see? You got DeGrom, Carrasco, Stroman, Peterson. Joey Lucchesi, and man, it's going to be an interesting rotation coming out there with this entire team. They got all that with Yamamoto as well. It's going to be an exciting time for the Mets, and kudos to all you guys. And my again sympathies to Mr. Cohen and his family. And I'm sorry you guys have to put up with a lot of crap.
Yeah, hopefully this season they do really good because I mean the top three of their pitching staff already looks pretty strong, but whenever Syndergaard comes back, and if he returns to form, could you imagine they could have four of the best pitchers, not just in the NL, but possibly in baseball?
They and the Padres are very exciting to me for this upcoming season. I'm really curious to see how that plays out. Like I said, the Mets had their troubles with Porter. They had to toss him out, and this nastiness with SNY. And then you look to the past, they had Mickey Callaway. He's been accused of indecent behavior, and all that's still being sorted out. So the Mets have had some interesting times this past month and this past season. I want to take a look, too, at some other front office actions and moves here on Baseball Biz. And again, you can find Brandon at Sports Blitz Pod and myself, Mark, at The Baseball Biz on Twitter. But we want to take a look at what's happening on here with front office and a couple of things. One, MLB and the Players Association have kind of been at cross purposes, you would think. But this is what kills me. I'm still not completely understanding, Brandon. We're talking about two organizations that agree on maybe a 154-game season, and there's been tentative agreement, I think, on designated hitter for the National League. I think there should be some continuity on there, so I'm glad to see that. But it sounded like the major sticking point, as far as I could tell, was the playoffs. I think MLBPA, the Players Association, wasn't necessarily really crazy about the whole idea of one more layer inside there. So we'll see how that plays out. Let's see. They got a statement they put out. This is from the Major League Baseball Players Association. If you want it, it's online. Go on to MLBplayers.com. You can find it there. Basically, they kind of said some of what I did. Let's see. The MLBPA Executive Board and Player Leadership reviewed and discussed the owner's proposal throughout the weekend and today. The clear-cut result of these deliberations is that players will not accept MLB's proposal, will instead continue preparations for an on-time start to 2021, and will accept MLB's commitment to again direct its clubs to prepare for an on-time start. We do not make this decision lightly. Players know firsthand the efforts that were required to complete the abbreviated 2020 season, and we appreciate that significant challenges lie ahead. We look forward to promptly finalizing enhanced health and safety protocols that will help players and clubs meet these challenges. So, still, like I said, there's still some sticking points, but they're ready to go move ahead with the season with what they have right now.
Yeah, the 154-game season, that would be fine with me. I've been a big proponent of saying the season should be shorter anyways. I agree with the big thing being not expanding the playoffs, because that not only takes away the importance of what is already honestly, if we're all honest, a boring regular season, it makes it even less important. And I also heard the point that if more teams make the playoffs, then it'll hurt free agency because teams will be less willing to go out and spend top dollar for top talent, because they'll be thinking, hey, if I can sneak in at 500, we just need to put together an average team. We don't need to be the best we can, and we get all that playoff money.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. That's very true. I could see why that would certainly be a blessing, if you will, for the owners if they got that. It's I don't know. We're going to see how it plays out. I feel like MLB has asked a lot of the fans and of the players, and they cry foul so much, but I hope that they're able to come into a decent agreement with the players that doesn't seem like they're always so greedy. And quite often that's the way it does seem with MLB. So sorry, Rob Manfred, but I hope you guys can get together with Tony Clark and make this all come together.
Yeah, they're going to need to work on their compromising, because the CBA comes to an end here in a few months, and the way they're going, I think we're not going to have a full season again next year, if we even have a season.
That's right, folks. And Brandon, those of you who don't know, the CBA is the collective bargaining agreement. That is the contract between the Players Association and Major League Baseball that guides them and says, basically, here's what we're going to do. If you don't come together on that, we may not have another season next year, as you're saying. And I think that's a real possibility. Yeah, let's take a jump here. We were talking earlier about the Padres, and I think it was early last month we kind of did a bit of a feature on A.J. Preller, and this guy has just done amazing. He's been absolutely amazing. The general manager, he's been with them for a bit. I think he came in around 2014. Pardon me. I think he came in around 2014. And the thing about it is, expectations are always high with any general manager you bring in. So there's expectations by about 2019. They're starting to scratch their head. He's done it well. He kind of gone up and down a little bit, but he knew things had to happen. So the purse strings were loosened up a bit with the Padres. To kind of give you an idea of how those were loosened up, in 2015 would have been the first year that he was signed on, meaning Mr. Preller. The payroll was about $109 million, Brandon. $109 million. In 2020 was $172 million. Can you imagine? I mean, that is life-changing. You know, you're not doubling it, but daggone, man, that is a hell of an increase, you know, over just a 5 or 6 year period. And I'm looking at some projections now for the 2021 Padres salary here from Sports Track, and they're saying $160 million, but I don't think that's complete. I mean, there's so much movement still going on. I'm sure it'll be higher than that. And I mean, think about who they brought on, Brandon. I mean, some of the guys, Manny Machado, one of my favorites. I will never forgive him for that kind of slow walk down to first base. But I thought you were lacking showing some love for the fans and what you need to be doing as a player. Okay, but who else did they bring on as well? Who was it?
They brought in Yu Darvish, Blake Snell, Joe Musgrove, I believe they brought him on as well. Ha-Seong Kim, a really big international prospect, they brought him on. And, I mean, they have all this talent on their team. I would say only $160 million, but that seems like a bargain for all the talent they have.
It does indeed. Like I said, I think that number will be higher than that. But even if you look at it as 172 or 180 million, who they are getting on this is just stupendous. So A.J. Preller has done a heck of a job, so much so that while he had a contract that was going to expire in 2022, the Padres said, you know, we ought to say thank you to this guy in another way. We're going to go ahead and make him president of baseball operations. And as soon as I heard that, my heart just fell. You know, it just, oh my gosh, what are they going to do? You know, they're elevating this guy. Oh, guess what? He's still going to continue to have the responsibilities as a general manager, which is smart. You have somebody who's bringing that kind of talent to your team and making a difference with who's out there on the field. You want to keep them in there. So basically, it sounds like they're just adding another title to it, and they're expanding his contract to 2026. So kudos to you, A.J. Preller, and I wish you continued success. Now, another fellow that you and I talked with, what was it, just last week, I believe, and that was Theo Epstein.
It was.
Geez, man, I tell you what, like I said, this floor shifts beneath the ground shifts beneath our feet as we speak. And Theo had taken his leave of the Cubs, I think it's back in November, and said, you know what, I'd like to be an owner someday, but right now I'm just going to take a little time off. So, about a week ago or so, he's saying, hey, MLB would like to offer you a position as a consultant. We'd like you to go ahead and help us out with some things, looking at the rules of the game, et cetera. I thought, oh, well, good. You and I talked about, well, wouldn't it be neat if this was a stepping stone for Epstein to become the commissioner? You know, maybe that's it. Maybe Rob Manfred's grooming him. I don't know.
So, yeah, please keep the floor moving. It keeps the topics coming in, gives us more to talk about. And Epstein seems like that guy who, he's like, man, I'm going to go on vacation. And when I come back, I'm going to eventually do this. But right now, I'm just going to take some time for myself. And then like 2 days into it, he comes back and he's like, okay, I'm ready for my next thing. Like he can't take a vacation.
No, I couldn't believe it either. So this guy's got too much, going on for him. So even though while we were talking about he took that new gig with MLB, the next thing that just kind of, didn't completely surprise me, because he had said he wanted to be in as an owner. And I saw a Wall Street Journal article the other day, and they said that basically he's joined the Arctos Sports Partners private equity firm. They're going to be looking at buying shares of professional sports teams. So I don't know what that means completely. He's their new executive in residence, quote unquote. But I'm still looking for great things from Theo, man. You're going to be on our our front office hot stove for a while. So we'll see what comes with that.
Hopefully he's on our commissioner hot stove here pretty soon.
Yeah, there's a lot of hot things going out there. One of them we talked about briefly. I still don't have enough information on it, but Ken Griffey Jr., he's now going to be doing something with MLB.
Yeah, from the sounds of things, he's going to be, kind of like an advisor to Manfred as well. Yeah, he's going to be a senior advisor to commissioner, and he's going to work in baseball ops and on youth baseball development, and he is tasked with improving diversity at amateur levels, which Major League Baseball came out and said last Friday, and that's according to the New York Post.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and that's good. He has a fresh face. He has a positive energy. He's recognizable, and I think he can certainly make a difference. So I'm really excited to see that and expect great things from Mr. Griffey. We've been talking also about some of the troubles that team owners that come into their lives, and the Dodgers, who've been doing really well. Their owner, Frank McCourt, boy, he got it pretty hard the other day. He's much like the Glazers owning a couple of teams. He has not just the Dodgers, he's got a soccer team. Yeah, so anyway, looking at McCourt, this team he has in the soccer over in Europe, unlike the Dodgers, the team, I think it's called Marseille. His team there's been a lot of criticism about it. And fans over in Europe, as you and I both know, when it comes to soccer, they have been fierce. And often that ferocity goes out and pours out onto the field, the soccer field. But evidently, this past week, the fans really reached a boiling point that things were really going crazy. A bunch of them got together and outside of the team's practice facility, they were throwing smoke bombs, firecrackers, all kinds of little explosive things like that just to make as much noise as possible. It was bad. I mean, they called in the police. They said over 300 protesters had attacked police officers in the process out there. They made 25 arrests. Man, this is not the sort of thing you like to hear in sports, and McCourt had a tough time with all this. So I'm not sure what's going to happen. They say, I think he had 3 losses in a row, the team did. Anyway, just a lot of things that were happening bad with team. And talking about bad behavior, man, this is bad behavior from fans. And I feel for Mr. McCourt, and I'm sure he'll still be happy he's got the Dodgers.
It's crazy how different sports fans react around the world to their team, losing. And over there in Europe with soccer, they're very passionate about it, as we can see. They'll riot over their team if they just lose a game.
Insane.
And then over here, if your team goes through a bad couple years, people just don't go to games. They lose interest. It's quite the different ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, it's a religious fervor with some of these folks. It's crazy now. I know fans for a lot of teams who are excited. We talked about this before because we had some crazy things coming up here in Tampa this week. But an owner with 2 teams like the Glazer family, Malcolm Glazer. Now, he owns a soccer team. I think it's was it Manchester United. He's got some criticism on that too, hadn't he?
Yeah, Malcolm Glazer, he bought the team. Manchester United, I think a little after the Bucs won the Super Bowl. I want to say around 2005. And, he's since passed on. And now his kids run both the operations. And for a while there, especially when, the Bucs went through really, really dark times around 2010. And people here really didn't like that they owned Manchester United because they felt like all the money was going towards that, while nothing was going towards the Bucs because they sucked. They felt like they were worried about their soccer team over their football team.
Yeah, well, those criticisms have fell to the wayside this year. We got some things going on here in Tampa, and one of them is the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl going on in Tampa this weekend, and it is nuts here. It's absolutely insane. I was talking with Louis Schiff the other day, the guy at Baseball and the Law. If you ever look on Twitter, he's amazing. And he's down there with the Marlins as he's a fan there. And he was pointing out, he says, Mark, he says, you guys, you got the craziest time. He says, you've got a team that's in the World Series. You got winners of the Stanley Cup. You got a team that's going to the Super Bowl. Oh, and by the way, it's in their own freaking hometown, which I don't think it's been there ever, a team in their own hometown. He says, you got those three things going on, and you can't go to the games. He's right. I mean, very limited number of people can go. And it hurts like I don't even want to talk about to have that kind of anxiety about not being able to go. But every day, I would take that every day, man, if it meant my teams were there.
Yeah, we were talking about this the other day, and we both agreed, hey, I'd rather make it and win it and not be able to go than be able to go and them not make it. And it's really is a sign of the times when something so historic, such as a team for the first time ever hosting a Super Bowl and playing in it, and nobody can go to it. It's limited attendance, and normal fans can't really go to the Super Bowl anyways because it's so corporate, but nobody can go to it. They can't really see it.
Well, yeah, exactly. But here in Tampa, we've had a lot of excitement this year. There's been I think the market, I should say, these teams have been misunderstood. They have been undervalued. And if you talk to a lot of other fans across the country, it's like, yeah, the Rays, this, yeah. The Bucs, oh, they stink. All of that's going on. But they've been misunderstood. They've been undervalued, and I just don't think people understand, what it's taken to get here and what they're capable of doing. There's just a lot of things people don't understand. But luckily, we have you here to explain a lot of things about the game. And it's that time of the show here on Baseball Biz for our Stat Wrap. Brandon, take it away. What's going on and what's the stat today we're going to talk about?
Well, just like I can do a whole show on stats, I can do a whole show on how Tampa fans are misunderstood. But that's another topic for another day. And this week we are talking about velocity and exit velocity. And even though they both are relatively the same, they're both measured differently. We'll start with velocity, which represents the maximum speed of a pitch at any point from its release to the time it crosses the plate. And before StatCast, it was performed by PitchFX, and it reported the velocity when it was 50 feet from the back of the plate. And some began using 55-foot measurements to get closer to the release point, because the release point, that is where the ball is at max speed most of the time due to physics. And StatCast now can measure it at any point, which is why velocity is measured at any point from release to crossing the plate. Whereas exit velocity is only measured at one point, where it's the speed of the ball as it comes off the bat for all batted events, which is outs, hits, and errors, with a higher velocity equaling a higher chance of reaching base because less time for the defense to react. And for pitchers, exit velocity against is used for them, with the better pitchers ranking among league leaders in limiting hard contact. And exit velocity is often used in scouting and even fantasy. Exit velocity is used to indicate future performance, with hard hits being considered skill-based, and conversely for pitchers, where if somebody is struggling statistically but they're hitting the ball hard, then there's someone who can be looked at as a candidate for breaking out soon, and the same could be said for pitchers conversely.
Okay. I'm trying to make sure I'm getting all this. Velocity and exit velocity. One's coming and one's going. One's throwing that ball, and that one's coming right back at you with the exit velocity. Is that accurate? But at least as far as the most basic understanding measurement?
Yes.
Okay, now let me understand a few other things.
Yeah.
So the velocity is the maximum speed of the pitch, and evidently the measurement you're saying is changed, I guess, simply because of the vendor who's able to measure this. And it went from 50 feet to 55 feet. So I guess that's closer to the time that it actually is released from the pitcher's hand. Is that where the measurement has changed?
Yeah, they want its velocity is the fastest point that a pitch is but they try to measure it the closest to the release point because, physics, gravity, all that. That's where it's at its fastest point.
I'm glad you cleared that up with physics and gravity and all that, because that's pretty much my understanding too. But but I hear so much. I don't hear as much about that, I believe, as I do the exit velocity, because that's the word. Probably I'm hearing it more because that's when it's assigned to. Usually I'm hearing with a home run has been achieved, and the exit velocity of that ball was X. But you're talking about that big part of it too. You're saying is the exit velocity is now. That's the speed, and you're saying that the importance of that is the faster it is, the less likely that a player is going to be able to, visualize, catch. What is that again? How's that working?
So basically, the higher velocity or the harder you hit the pitch, you get a higher chance of reaching base because the faster the ball, the less time the defenders have to react to the ball.
Okay, that's understandable. So that's it. Okay, stat wrap this week, velocity and exit velocity. I hope all you're doing your homework and taking notes. Last week we did spin rate, and we'll have some more goodies for you guys on that. That's from Mr. Brandon No Way, again, from @SportsBlitzPod. So make sure you reach out to him if you like there on Twitter, and me, Mark, @TheBaseballBiz. And Brandon, I tell you what, man, it's been an exciting week. I keep saying you're wondering if off season is going to be boring, and it certainly was this week. Certainly not. There's just so much happening. Some of it is going to be instrumental in teams that are coming up. I mean, you and I looking at the Padres and the Mets and the changes going on there. I think it's going to be very interesting watching them, as several other teams as well. But I am really excited about the trades that they've been able to make.
Yeah, maybe we'll get a Mets Padres NLCS.
Ooh, that would be exciting. All right. Well, everybody, I want to thank you all again for joining us here on Baseball Biz on yet another week. And you can find us here, obviously, and are on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbean. We're everywhere. That's just who we are. And we thank you again for joining us today. Special thanks also to X-Take RUX for providing the music Rocking Forward. Thank you, everybody, and we'll take care, and we'll see you again real soon.
Go Bucs. Yeah, that went really good.